Either it's like a light bulb, you're either in I don't know if you see my light, but you're either in sympathetic fight or flight mode, or you're in parasympathetic rest and digest. You can't be in both. And when you're in the fight or flight mode, you're getting stuff done, you're multitasking, you're worried about things. All that voltage, it's in your brain, it's in your eyes, it's in your ears, it's getting you ready for fight or flight to get stuff done. And so if you try to eat when you're in that mode, it's the healthiest food's going to turn into fermentation. It's going to cause the production of inflammatory substances that inflame everything in your body, including your heart vessels, your GI system, your neurological system. You're not going to think is great. Your joint pain's going to be worse. So I've seen tons of GI issues come in. They're eating like few ingredients, and whether it's a diagnosable thing like IBD, like, something that's serious, autoimmune disease, or something that's completely undiagnosable. Nobody knows what it is. No one's put a label on it. And they don't realize that their anxiety, their worry, their fear, their habit, their addiction of being stuck in that worry fear mode is what is creating that environment for them.
Hello, and welcome to Legends of Longevity with me, Joseph Ence. I'm your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey towards living a longer, stronger, and more vibrant life. The podcast is about uncovering the secrets to longevity, things your doctor does not tell you, whether it's groundbreaking advancements in heart health, lifestyle tips to keep you thriving, or inspired stories of people who've defied the odds. Together, we'll explore the tools, techniques, and mindset shifts that can help you unlock your fullest potential. Whether you're here to learn how to enhance your well-being, support your loved ones, or just stay ahead of the curve in health and wellness, you're in the right place. Let's empower each other to not only live longer, but live stronger. This is Joe with Longevity, or what's our podcast name? Legends of Longevity with Vaso Labs. I'm here with Dr. Travis Mowery, who's got a really interesting story. He's a naturopath down in Arizona. He's got some great clinics where he helps people help themselves, which is kind of a new business model in medicine, or at least it's a renewed business model. So Travis, reading your website, you were unhealthy at some point, and You made a decision, and looks like you even went to medical school to follow it through, or naturopath school.
Yeah, I never wanted to be a doctor. I honestly thought it was dumb. I still kind of think it was dumb as far as my health goes in the long run. But I just, you become evangelical about things when you learn good principles. When you understand something that makes a difference and makes an impact, not only on yourself, but, I've always had a goal to help people. That's just been, when I was a little kid, people would ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I never knew what to say. I just said, I want to help people. And I just didn't know how I was going to do it. But that was my ultimate goal. So I went, I was going to school for business, and I was in my, kind of right in my sophomore year of college, and I just got super sick. I was away from home, and I just wasn't healing. And I just trusted doctors to fix me. I just thought that you got sick. These guys, they're super educated. They're very knowledgeable. You go to them and they just fix you. So I just did everything they asked me to do to the T.
You should trust them.
Exactly. That's the marketing that we've all been given growing up, right? Everything we believe is based in marketing. It's because it's taught to our parents, it was taught to our teachers, our leaders in our life, and we just absorb that and we think it's truth until something happens in our life that makes us question it. And I just trusted doctors, did everything they asked me to do, and I ended up with 3 new chronic illnesses from all the medications that I was given. And I'm not anti anything, right? We have this thing today where, like, if you don't fully believe what's sold to you, then you're anti, and it has nothing to do with that. Everything's a tool, and tools can be used for harm or for benefit. But when you are so hyper focused on just one set of tools that exist, you're going to end up having a problem because there's so many other tools that are out there. You can't be that reductionistic in how you think of medicine, think of really anything. You have to be open-minded to what else is out there. And if you're not, you're going to have an experience someday that opens your mind. If you're willing to, anyway, open your mind. So I ended up getting sick. I had to withdraw from school. I was literally in pain every day of my life. I went from being 190 pounds in athletic, being able to run 2 miles in 10 minutes, to literally being laying in bed all day, 145, 150 pounds, constant pain. And one of the diagnoses that they gave me was irritable bowel disease, or irritable bowel syndrome, not IBD, IBS. And if people don't know about that, it's a diagnosis of exclusion. And what that means is, if it doesn't fit into any of these other boxes, we can't find a positive test about anything, then you just fit into this catch-all box. We really don't know what it is, but we're not going to tell you that. We have this name for it, so this is what you have. And it just happens to kids your age sometimes. There's no reason for it. It just happens. And I thought I was a victim to disease. They gave me tons of antibiotics. They gave me tons of steroids. And that's what caused me to have the gut GI imbalance. They just said it just happens to kids your age sometimes. And in all reality, no, it doesn't. There's a reason for everything. An environment was created that led me to have a change in the environment of my gut. And, we're learning today, the frontier of medicine really is learning how we have to be symbiotic with the microbiome, with, all the other living things that are around us. Our gut is a great determinant of our health. It's ground zero because it's where nutrition is absorbed. It's where inflammation can cause you to reabsorb toxins. You end up getting little holes in your gut that you reabsorb things. It's where a lot of your immune system lives. It's where like the majority of our neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, are made. So if we're not, if we're messing with the system that creates our long-term communication signals like serotonin, dopamine, or neurotransmitters, we reabsorb toxins through there, which causes miscommunication in the body. We're causing a constant immune battle within our gut. What autoimmune disease can that not create in the long run? So, does that make sense?
Yeah, like I'm just thinking about all these poor women out there. They get a bug. The doctor nukes their whole GI system with antibiotics. All their good and bad bacteria are gone. But every woman knows, all right, here comes the yeast infection. Here comes the thrush. Because their bodies, like, there's got to be a better way. And every woman seems to go through this, especially middle age and later in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And something like that happened to you where you're doing okay, you're healthy, and antibiotics, and suddenly you're worse, and then the steroids, and you're full of inflammation and gaining weight and not feeling great. And there's got to be a better way. I'm totally with you.
Yeah. So, looking back at everything I went through, and, to name the other things that happened, I ended up getting permanent ringing in my ears. So tinnitus, irritable bowel syndrome. I had like chronic joint pain from being overdosed on ibuprofen. Most people don't know that NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, they actually can cause inflammation when you take them for a long period of time, or you take them in high enough doses. The drugs I was taking were ototoxic. So literally it was causing damage to my ears, making me more susceptible. And I play music, and I started getting permanent ringing in my ears. It weakened my hearing. It weakened my ability to recover from any kind of like noise trauma. So those were three of the things that happened. And then on top of that, it was the first time in my life I ever knew what depression felt like. I was not prone to depression. That wasn't who I was as a person. And nothing changed until my wonderful mother, who's now passed away, who was my first educator in nutrition. She's like, hey, let's send you to a naturopath. And I'm like, naturopath, like some hippie guy? Sure, I'll go see whoever. Like, no one else has helped me. Like,
I'll see the granolas.
Exactly. So I met Chris Miletus, my first naturopathic doc up in Beaverton, Oregon, and he taught me there were laws that govern health. The first thing he told me was, hey, you got to go to bed on time. I was like, what do you mean I got to go to bed on time? I'm sleeping like 15 hours a day. He's like, yeah, dude, but you're on Chinese time. You go to bed when people in China do. There's something celestial about this. You got to go to bed when people here go to bed. You got to go to bed when it's dark outside and wake up when it's light. Because I was going to bed at like when my parents were waking up for work. I was in pain every day. All I could do was get on the internet and research. I was just researching, how do I fix myself? I didn't know what else to do. Getting on forums, reading about all these other people and all these, things that they've done. And I started changing my diet slightly. I started going to bed on time. I started going outside and visualizing being healthy again. Instead of being caught up in like the fear. Fear is a frequency that hinders. Faith and fear cannot coexist. And, faith and hope are connected. It's an expectation of a positive outcome, right? That's what that end of the spectrum is, the faith and hope. And the anxiety, the fear end, that is an expectation of a negative outcome. And I was stuck like this. To me, it seemed like out of nowhere, my whole life was ripped from me. And if this can happen, it can happen at any time. So what's going to happen next? And you get stuck in this fear state. And it wasn't until I started actively trying to be mindful of my thoughts, that frequency I was putting out in the world, actively trying to change just slightly. I wasn't like being perfect in how I was eating. I was still a kid. I was, 20, 21 years old. back at home with mom and dad. I was eating what mom and dad ate. And I was just changing it slightly. I was taking some anti-inflammatory supplements to help me out. And slowly I started to heal, and I learned that you cannot heal without hope. It is critical to healing. And after that happened to me, I became evangelical. I just wanted to help other people understand that felt stuck, that worried that maybe they'll never get married, maybe they'll never be able to have a career, have a family. They're just stuck. Like, this is it. Because I was in that place that, like, God, if you don't fix me, if you don't help me to get fixed, like, just take me, because I can't handle this. Like, I cannot live with this much pain every day of my life. And you know what? I'm grateful for that, because that's the people I see. I can relate to people and their chronic illness, and that's what I'm seeing every day. I got people coming in the door, and they've been to Mayo Clinic, they've been to Nevada and New York, and they've been to all these specialty places. I'm just a guy in a little office, and they heard about me from some family or friend, and I can relate to them, and they trust me. And because we can have that trusting relationship, because medicine isn't just a science, it's actually an art, and the science is in service to the art. The art is the connection that you build with someone. It's how much you decide to do. It's how you're going to take steps forward together, because everyone's different, and you have to treat them as an individual. There's no protocol for a diagnosis or disease. Yeah, you can do that, and you can get some traction with a chunk of people. But if you actually want to create a condition, the conditions for health to exist, you have to look at it as an individual and look at what are the obstacles that's keeping this individual from healing, what are the deficiencies that are keeping them from having the vitality to self-heal, and what tools do we have to reduce the obstacles and to support the deficiencies. And if we can do that, whether it's on the spiritual level, the mental level, the emotional level, it doesn't matter. We can make traction when there hasn't been traction if we can do that.
The whole medical system right now is set up to be, you get a 15-minute prescription, an appointment and a prescription. And that prescription, it's almost like the medical system realized they can put all millions of patients on this subscription plan and get the same prescription. And they're not going to get better. They may not get worse, it's so disappointing. And then I meet providers like you who, I bet your appointments are more than 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, minimum an hour, and new visits are 2 hours usually. And it takes time to get to know the person well enough. And there's times you have to go to someone's house. you have to look at their environment. You have to ask deeper questions. You can't get the information you need to help someone heal in 15 minutes. Ultimately, I'm the guide. They have the power to heal themselves. They don't know it. And a lot of that gets unlocked when they learn what are their obstacles. They become self-aware of those obstacles, so now we can change them. And they become aware of the deficiencies, so we can start making efforts towards changing them and overcome the addictive habits that they've put into place to cope with their unmet needs. The number one thing I'm treating every week is addiction. People don't think of it that way because we think of drugs and alcohol and pornography and stuff like that as addiction. But like an addiction is putting into place a repetitive habit to meet an unmet need in your life. And it's a habit that doesn't actually meet that need. So, we have to take a look at what are the addictive patterns that are going on in people's life, and what are the needs that are driving those behaviors. Whether they don't feel loved, they don't feel important, because the mental emotional stuff is huge in all this. I've never met someone with a chronic illness that doesn't have some kind of mental emotional aspect to it. In fact, I'd say most chronic illnesses are the result of deep and unmet needs, unresolved trauma years ago, and they put habits into place to meet that unmet need. And those habits led to them having a deeper and deeper chronic illness.
Let's be specific and use some examples, because I like what you're saying, but I want people to like that light bulb to go off over their head. So you meet people, sometimes they got a bad attitude, or they got a bad environment, or they're eating bad food, or just something else. And you got to bird dog what it is so they can fix it. You can't.
Honestly, I got goosebumps right now just having the opportunity to talk about this, because this is huge. I haven't seen anything create traction in chronic illness better than actually helping people resolve their unresolved trauma. So I'll give you a couple examples that come to mind really quick. I had this woman come in, asthma, horrible. She's in her mid-20s, She literally is using an emergency inhaler 5 times a day at least. And she comes in and she's constantly going to the emergency room to get an emergency inhaler because she runs out because she uses them quicker than she's supposed to. She's never getting appropriate prescription because they keep going higher and higher. So she comes in and I just know, I have to do something different. And I just can
That
tell.
ain't right, lady. That ain't right. Let's fix that.
Well, so through the questioning, I realized that she has some trauma in her life. I can just tell by the way that her demeanor, how she's answering questions, there's a depressed and anxious aspect to her. And so I just asked the question, when was the last time you felt well? And, it's been so long, it was hard for her to remember. And then I asked her what happened between then and now. And the answer she came up with, I happened next, honestly, do you feel like you've gone through some trauma in your life? And then she starts crying a little bit. And she starts telling me about the abuse that she's gone through in her life. And I'm like, listen, there's 2 routes we can go to on this visit. We can go through the normal intake and we can, get your whole background and spend 2 hours so I can make an adequate treatment plan for you. But I actually think from my experience, the best way I can get you feeling better right away is if we spend half the visit doing like a trauma therapy. And so I do, some visualization techniques, acupuncture, just multiple tools that I have to help people process trauma. And she decided to try that. So we did some trauma processing with her about those specific traumas, abuses that she's gone through in life. And I didn't see her for 6 weeks. And when she came in, she hadn't used her inhaler but one time, one puff on one day over that 6 weeks when she was climbing stairs on an annoying family vacation that she didn't want to go on. So in Chinese medicine, grief is connected to the lungs. So if you have unresolved grief, you don't have the same voltage going to your lungs. There's a book here, Dr. Jerry Tennant down here in Arizona, but there's a book called Healing is Voltage. And it kind of it ties you in, helps you think in a different way that, there is voltage going through your cells in your body, through your organs and systems. And, those maps of, in Ayurveda or in Chinese medicine, they're maps of how that energy, that electricity moves in the body. So when you go through something traumatic and you don't resolve it, you end up having kind of a blockage on that electrical system and you end up getting low voltage. And when you have low voltage, it's kind of like when you get done with a day of work and you're like, oh, I got to go home. I got to do my honey-do list. I got to make dinner. I got to help the kids with whatever. And then you sit down, you're like, oh, I'm done. We're ordering out. I'm going to bed early. I can't do anything else. You're surviving. When you have low voltage, you're surviving. So cells have about, healthy cells, and forget the negative, it doesn't really mean anything. They have negative 25 microvolts. When people are chronically ill, it's negative 15. But to heal, you have to get up to negative 65. And voltage is a pressure that pushes electrons. Electrons get work done. So you have to get a higher voltage, higher amount of energy to get more work done. Work is repairing the cell. Work is detoxing. It's pulling the junk. Every cell eats and poops like we do, and all that cellular waste, that cellular exhaust, it's called metabolic waste. It has to come out of the cell, and if not, it's going to clutter the cell up, and it's going to keep it from doing its job. Kind of like if your house is full of junk, you're not going to be efficient at getting things done. Heck, if it's so cluttered, you're not going to even communicate well. You might have to yell through the clutter to, ask your wife something. So when we have low voltage, there's no way to heal, and when we have unresolved trauma, we end up having parts of our body that are low voltage for so long that they literally become susceptible to real physical diagnoses like asthma. Another example is I had a young man come in and we actually came to find out that he was vaccine injured. It was a vaccine injured him that caused him to have irritable bowel disease. So he had Crohn's disease. And he had his colon partially removed when he was a very young man, elementary school, 8 years old-ish. And I didn't see him until I think about 14. And I realized right away he had extreme social anxiety. And similar thing, I decided hey, let's do some trauma acupuncture. Let's do something to just help you process the social anxiety. So I get people in an alpha theta brainwave, get them relaxed so they're more self-aware of what their body feels like. And then I purposely trigger them. And when they get triggered, guess what they feel? They feel that same symptom that they feel when they have an anxiety attack, that same symptom they feel when they have, for people with IBD, like a bowel attack, that same feeling he gets when the whole family's worried he's going to have part of his colon removed again. And we processed it, and we go to it again. and then it's lighter, and we go into it again, and it's lighter, and we go into it again, and he doesn't feel anything. And now he started joining sports teams. He was able to take tests at school without. He went into remission for a very long time from just, multiple things. And in that situation, I get this a lot too. People come in and they're eating 5 ingredients because they've already seen a functional medicine doctor or another naturopathic doctor or someone, and they're going the right direction, but they're not thinking deep enough, because it's not just about the food, it's about the environment you're in when you're eating the food. I would rather have someone that is a chill, laid back dude that eats junk than someone who is uptight and trying to eat a perfect diet and stressed all the time. Because it's like a light bulb, you're either in, I don't know if you see my light, but you're either in sympathetic fight or flight mode, or you're in parasympathetic rest and digest. You can't be in both. And when you're in the fight or flight mode, you're getting stuff done, you're multitasking, you're worried about things. All that voltage, it's in your brain, it's in your eyes, it's in your ears, it's getting you ready for fight or flight to get stuff done. And so if you try to eat when you're in that mode, it's the healthiest food's going to turn into fermentation. It's going to cause the production of inflammatory substances that inflame everything in your body, including your heart vessels, your GI system, your neurological system. You're not going to think is great. Your joint pain is going to be worse. So I've seen tons of GI issues come in. They're eating like few ingredients, and whether it's a diagnosable thing like IBD, like, something that's serious, autoimmune disease, or something that's completely undiagnosable. Nobody knows what it is. No one's put a label on it. And they don't realize that their anxiety, their worry, their fear, their habit, their addiction of being stuck in that worry fear mode is what is creating that environment for them. And then, again, we have to look at them as an individual, and how do we reduce the obstacles that are creating this situation? How do we support the deficiencies in their life, whether that deficiency is on the mental, the emotional?
How do you tell your patient, Mr. Patient Man, you are intense? We got to dial this back because you're really internalizing this. How do you have that conversation?
It's going to be a case-by-case basis. You have to look at the individual. Not everyone's ready to receive,
that's
information,
a big one.
right? So I have to that's the art of medicine, right? Like, yes, I can bluntly just tell you what I think, but sometimes it's not going to be received if I tell them bluntly what I think, and I have to tell them what I think they're ready to receive at that time.
Okay. I'm dying to ask you this question because you're hinting at it, that you've got a structure, external environment, internal spirituality, and, positive vibes. What's your structure that you operate under?
Help me understand your question a little better.
Because you're talking about the spiritual aspect of the energy, the vibration of the person, how they feel, and that affects them. Trauma is something external that, you seem to have a lot of influences in your thinking. Asian, an American crap medical system, naturopath, which is better, but you're kind of bringing on something new here that's not in the medical CPT code system.
Well, everything's a tool, and all those different things you're talking about there, all those ways of thinking, some people might look at them and say, hey, these are they contradict each other. But in honesty, they don't. They all go together. They go together really well. Like I was saying earlier, the map of the chakras in in Ayurveda.
I was a disbeliever in that until 6 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Going,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
So new. That overlaps with the Chinese medicine map, all the acupuncture points. And this is my opinion, right? I'm not going to be able to prove this through any medical book or whatever, but I think that those are the transformer points that connect the body and the spirit together. They give instructions to the body and how it wraps around the spirit. Interesting side note in Chinese medicine, something that I learned about is when you take a denser substance and you inject something lighter into it, it folds in the exact same pattern that the fetus folds in the body. So when the spirit gets injected into this dimension and you start getting matter that's wrapping around, or however you want to say it, how it's connecting to it, it's an interesting thing to think of it that way. But we literally have different forms of matter that are connected to each other. And how do they do that? This is beyond what medicine thinks about today, but in all reality, every form of successful medicine in history recognizes that there's more than the physical body, that the spirit is real, it does exist, And, this can get into religious stuff or whatever, but, there's a reason why Shangdi in China and, I think Horus in Egypt and Krishna in India said word for word things that Jesus Christ said in the New Testament, because it's just all the result of the telephone game. Like, there is a God, there is a higher power, and he's tried to send the same messages since the world began. And, we were spirits. We did prepare to come here, in my opinion. And now that we're here, we're learning how to control these bodies, which it's like, you can't get a Ferrari right away. We're getting like body 2.0. And now we're trying to control our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings. And we're trying to do that because there's more for us. This isn't the end of our progression in our existence. And we have to learn personal responsibility and self-control so we can share in, the responsibility that's going to come after. But that's getting into stuff that's, beyond medicine. Maybe not everyone that
you're
listens
spot on.
care.
And you started out with like, I was sick. I had to fix myself. And you had to like tune into something different. You had to, visualization wasn't a tool I thought was real or sincere until I've had some experiences where people who can really they see the person they want to be. And then they just start thinking in a different way. This person that I want to be would eat different things. They would exercise. They'll express more love. They'll receive more love.
Yeah.
And that just is such a holistic way to do it. In addition to that, these Qigong guys believe in this energy, which my whole life just seems so ridiculous. And I'm sad that I felt that way. And like up there in Scottsdale, you've got a great doctor, Robert Sheeler. He wrote the newsletter for the Mayo Clinic for like 20 years. And just one of those brains, the guys who like biochemistry.
Sure.
We don't like those guys, but we like to have them around. Anyways, he's a Qigong guy, and he's telling me about energy, and, I don't know, I'm an American kid, what do I think? But chefs, people who cook for other people, they take their energy and vibration and put it in that food, and you can't tell me that some chefs are way better than other chefs, even if they're using the same ingredients.
Sure.
Like, there's an energy to it that you can infuse love and all that. And I was like, wow, what a crazy idea, that there's something in there. There's some energy. There's some intelligence.
Intention is
real. It's real, right? Mm-hmm. So 6 weeks ago, I signed up for a class. Well, the class was 6 weeks ago. It's called VibraVision. And we put on friggin' blindfolds so we could not see. And we're doing games where we're sensing with our hands. And at the end of the class, 5 days later, 12 hours a day, like a pretty good commitment for a crash course, I'm finding bean bags I'm blindfolded, finding them with my hands, and then I'm able to put it on top of a PVC pipe coming out of the ground. I did it 4 times in a row, and I knew it was impossible every time I did it, but I did it. And after that class, I'm like, all right, there's more here. Yeah. There's more energy. You do exercises in this class to pump up your energy. You're trying to focus it. You're trying to have positive intention. You can't do it around negativity at all, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that opened my eyes. And so now that you're talking about this energy and environment and chi, and I'm listening, man. Keep preaching.
Yeah, well, it's huge. You remind me of something that we've realized in our profession. So, what naturopathic medicine is, a lot of people don't know that. It is like an encompassing term that includes, Chinese medicine, homeopathy, herbal medicine, in addition to Western medicine. Like, we're trained in multiple forms of medicine, right? Homeopathy being one of our forms of medicine, there is something that a lot of us have experienced, and that is you can make a homeopathic remedy, or graft it is what it's called, when you can expand a homeopathic remedy in office. And what's interesting is when you're making that remedy, you see people get results, right? Now, if you hand that off to your office staff and hey, can you do this? This is how you do it, right? You can do the same process, have them do the process, but then they don't get the results. And what they were realizing...
Wait, is this that machine where you take a little bottle of water and you put it on and you program in the energy or intensity or resonance it's going to have?
Well, so...
Those are like $20,000 boxes, man. Those are not cheap.
Yeah, so that is talking about the same type of thing going on here, but this is a little bit more rudimentary. So things like that, like the CyberScan machine and stuff like that, where they're frequency machines, biofeedback machines is what they call it if you didn't pay the $1 million to have the U.S. government study it. which is a
Yep.
quite hilarious thing. It's considered the same accuracy as an MRI over in other parts of the world, but in the US, you have to repay them the money in order to be able to say it does what it's actually able to do. But anyway, this is a little bit more rudimentary. It's literally taking a remedy and mixing into a medium and then just kind of expanding the remedy, keep it going. Because a lot of us believe that it's really kind of a frequency medicine. That's why homeopathy is effective. And you see it's effective. You do your dog, you can't placebo your dog, and your dog stops having anxiety, like weird stuff like that. They did it in MD Anderson with cancer cells, and the cancer cells stopped growing when they used like thuya and phytolacca, these like historic cancer remedies. In a petri dish. You can't like placebo a petri dish. So there's something to homeopathy. It's a whole nother, we can have another discussion for that someday. But what I was getting at is the difference was the doctors, we put intention in when we're making the remedy. Part of it is succussing it, and you're actually imagining that person being well. And when you do it to your office staff, they're not necessarily doing that. They're just doing a task in the middle of the day and getting it done. They're not actually thinking about that person being well. You're not visualizing the person being well, or you're making it. And it was the only thing that was different when people were doing well and then they weren't doing well anymore, and the patient didn't know this, and then you do make the remedy again, and then they start responding to it again. So this goes really deep. I wasn't expecting to talk about this kind of stuff today.
That goes really deep.
Yeah.
The visualization does, like, that's the next objective for reality for you, because that's what you think. And there's studies about people who visualize and people who actually experienced events. Your brain doesn't know the difference.
It doesn't. Yeah, they learned that in the Olympics in the 80s, when they were having them go through. They had the same brain patterns when they actually did the event as in when they visualized it. You look at successful people, like Michael Jordan, stuff like that. I mean, they understand these kind of things. To tie this back into health, I don't know that I've ever seen a patient heal that's stuck in a fear state. Like part of what I'm doing sometimes is helping them overcome that fear state, because it's an addiction. A lot of times people have like OCD fears because that's how they protect themselves. Like last time, I thought intensely about all the problems that could possibly happen and how many times I touched the doorknob and I made sure I walked out of the room with the same foot. I mean, whatever. People come up with a lot of different things. They have their own personal rules that they make up because they went through the last fear episode that they had and they survived. So now that something's happening, it's scary again. So they're repeating the pattern because they think that's how they end up being safe. They have this kind of stuck pattern, the stuck false belief in their mind that over exhausting their energy in trying to think of every possible worrisome, scary scenario is what's going to protect them in the end. And they don't realize that thoughts take energy, and all they're doing is draining their energy in their body that they need to heal everything else in their body. Because that's why so many people have anxiety. It's kind of like, I have
Are you saying OCD is a cause of trauma is a cause of OCD?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. It's not knowing how to process that trauma. Scrupulosity, like people feeling overly guilty over little things. I mean, all of these things are just protective mechanisms.
Scrupulosity?
Yeah, scrupulosity. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing it the exact proper way, but
like scruples, like what you worry about, what you. I like that word.
A lot of young people these days are like overly worried that they've created some kind of like shame or guilt or sin in their life or something that they just can't overcome. And like even they do all they're worried every little thing they do is like huge. And this ties into another aspect of mental health, and that is codependence. We're living in a world today where people think that their value comes from what other people think about them, and ultimately that's not true. And if you think that, well, I mean, I'm going to be real. It seems like a podcast I can be real on.
Dude, I have 5 handicapped dogs in wheelchairs. I'm a good person. Yeah. Even though I'm mean to everyone I talk to, I have 5 handicapped dogs that I spend a lot of time and money taking care of. Like, you're misaligned, person. You're misaligned. That does not make you the best person. You're a good person for helping the dogs, for sure, but
yeah, you
can't, it's everything. It's holistic.
You can't take on all of that, and you can't control what other people think. Think about this gender dysphoria stuff we got going on today. Can we go there? Can we talk about that?
I'm okay with it. I think it's all propaganda put on by the government to reduce our fight back power. 70% of our young men are not even fit enough to join the military.
Yeah, I heard it was 80. But yeah, you're absolutely. So if I have a patient comes to me and says, hey, Dr. Mowery, I know I'm a boy, but I feel like a girl, and people can make fun of me and whatever, but that's how I feel. Now that doesn't happen. I don't get that kind of case come in the door. But that would be like, hey, listen, there's real reasons for that. I don't know if you know this, but like all vaccinations have male and female DNA in them. We've never looked at what that can do to people. It's readily uptaken in the cells. We have a lot of social pressures going on. We have a huge rise in autism, and guess what? People who are on the spectrum are they're very influenced. They do a lot of mirroring to be able to try to feel like they are connected to other people, because they have a hard time connecting and feeling connected to others. So there's multiple things that we can argue about what's going on here. But that would be, if they came and said that to me, that for me would be a place of like, hey, I have confidence in who I am. I know I have value, and I'm having this weird experience and I don't know what to do about it. But that's not what's going on today. What's going on today is like, no, call me by my proper pronouns. And if you don't, then you're committing violence against me. And you're trying to make me commit suicide. Why would you make me value you like that? Like, why would my thoughts about you matter? Like, if you have self-confidence, then why would it matter what I think or anybody else thinks? Why do you have to force me to think what you think? Like, that's not okay. That's actually dangerous, because that's how people get in abusive relationships. They're in a relationship, and this ties into trauma. I'm dealing with this stuff on a weekly basis. If you don't have good self-worth and self-confidence, well, then as soon as you find someone that gives you attention and gives you some kind of love, you just attach and hold on to them. And if they start getting bored of you or frustrated or whatever and start pushing you away, what do? You're being abusive towards me a little. Well, I'm going to tie on even harder, because you're where my value comes from. So you end up getting into this deeper and deeper abusive relationship because you don't have self-worth. And if people just realize that ultimately they are valuable, it doesn't come from other people. In my opinion, we're all children of God, and because of that, we have an eternal worth. We have a divine potential, an infinite potential, an infinite worth. And if they knew that, then they could approach situations and be okay. Like, there's going to be people that listen to me saying this. They're not going to agree with me. That's okay. They don't have to agree with me. My value doesn't come from everybody agreeing with me. I am not right about everything. I'm always adapting and learning, because you have to. Life isn't about perfection. We're all the products of our experience. And as we learn, and we're able to correct, and we're able to do better. But, I'm sharing what I know right now. And this is what my experience has taught me so far. And being able to, and being in this position for a decade.
Something that's in common with all the people I really, really like in my life are people who found themselves in a bad position, a not optimal position, and they figured it out. They read, they prayed, they visualized, they got help, they formed a community, something. And whether it took months or years, they dug out. And after that one experience, they're much more resilient. They don't feel like they're at the mercy of everything. And I believe we're here on the earth, like, that's what we're here to do, is how do I overcome, how do I manifest my will in a positive direction and be useful and of service to others? Like, that is super consistent among all the people that I really, really like, is that they got purpose, and they know that when they're on task, nothing is going to stop them.
Yeah. We're all here to learn and grow, and I heard this quote on the History Channel like 25 years ago, but it was like, opposition, either it makes some men break and other break records. And, it just depends on how we want to take that opposition, what we want to do with it. But it's the truth. You can't grow without
opposition. So opposition, if I don't hold my breath, my lung capacity is never going to get better. If I don't do cold immersion therapy, I'm never going to get that brown fat to stay warmer, so I'm not chilled and hot. Your body thrives on adversity. So if you're babying it, you're not going to get where you want to go.
You can't build your immune system without breaking it down. You can't, without challenging it. You can't build your muscles without breaking them down. I mean, there is no growth without opposition. It's a part of it. And when you don't have opposition, honestly, life's pretty boring. Like, you'll create opposition in your life. If you don't have opposition, you think about, when I was a kid, we had video games. So you had all the cheat codes. It wasn't fun anymore. It was fun for a little bit, but it got really boring. There's no challenge.
Yeah, you start doing run-throughs as fast as you can.
Yeah. So, everything is a tool, right? And the philosophy is what the framework is that we use those tools on. So, going back to what, naturopathy is like, I have all these tools. I can think of these things from all these different directions. And so when someone comes in the door, I can look at what are their obstacles, what are their deficiencies, and what tools do I have to help them get back into balance. How do I treat them on all those levels? You can't treat people reductionistically. You can't treat them as it's,
Algorithm.
yeah, you can't treat them as algorithm. But we have this tendency today where we send everyone to all these different specialists, and everyone has their place. I'm not knocking on specialists at all. Like, I use
No, the
specialists.
specialists are too specialized now.
It's they're negating the other parts of the body, and in many cases their treatment is hurting this other thing, and there's no one that was really able to look at it all and go, hey, let's look at this. Like, I have patients that they have specialists for different things, but the thing is like, I'm at least able to be there, and when the specialist gives a treatment or whatever, I'm the person that they rely on to give them true informed consent about how this affects everything else if they decide to do it. Because the specialist treatment in some cases could be beneficial. It's not all just drugs and stuff. I mean, doctors are trying to get a little bit more holistic these days, but like,
They're trying, but they're going to still give you, if they're the ear doctor, they're just going to throw antibiotics on you because that's what they got, right?
a lot of times, yeah, there's a time that you need that ear surgery for, something very unique, like the ear bones are starting to get all arthritic. But there's something in my medicine that is about using like kind of a hierarchy. And so you start on the lowest level, and the lowest level is looking at the person, looking at the obstacles to remove deficiencies. Then you look at nutrition, you look at things like, how to adjust backs and bones, whatever. Well, when you get to it, it's like step 7 before you use drugs. Like, like you go through all these other steps before you get to that point. And, most medical doctors, they don't have any training in that kind of stuff. A lot are trying to, and so they're doing functional medicine training. But sometimes in that, they can be really great. It's just like my profession, because you have the name of a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor. It's a label, and you can find people that are great and people that aren't great. It's just what it is. But if you can end up having something like we call green allopathy. Like, let's say someone comes in and they have hypertension, high blood pressure. Well, in Western medicine, you give them lisinopril. That's one of the first line treatments. But they don't have high blood pressure because they have a lisinopril deficiency. Like, yeah, that will work, but you have to keep taking it for a long period of time. Well, what's the obstacle? What's the deficiency? Well, maybe they've got trauma going on in their family and they're not sleeping well. Maybe because they've got trauma going on in their family, they're not digesting well and they're not absorbing the magnesium, or they're not eating well and they're magnesium deficient. Right? You cannot absorb minerals without stomach acid. And if you're stuck in a sympathetic nervous system state, you're not going to have enough stomach acid to absorb minerals. So you're going to be low in zinc. You're going to be low on magnesium. You're going to be low on these things that you need in order to have the tools needed to have all the normal functions in the body. So you could supplement them with magnesium, but maybe that's still not deep enough. Maybe the high blood pressure goes down, but they're still going to be prone, or they're going to be stuck supplementing magnesium unless we look at their diet and we look at what environment are they in when they're eating that diet so they can absorb the magnesium. So it gets deeper than that. I could switch them to, raufia. I could put them on like an herb that lowers blood pressure. But if I did that and I was using that as a permanent solution, not just a temporary tool until we get to the solution, then they're just going to be on that the rest of their life instead of lisinopril. And you could say that's a step in the right direction. It's going to be more nutritive in some ways, but in the end, that's just green allopathy. You're just doing an allopathic paradigm, but now you're just switching it in with something that's considered natural. That's not getting to the root problem.
Hey, I feel like I got to say this, but it's not really relevant to our conversation. There's people that grew up in homes that were extremely dysfunctional, and all the habits they picked up are not long-term great habits.
Yeah.
And at some point in your adult life, you'll be like, wait a minute, I may have been doing things wrong a little bit. I may have been harsh. I may be whatever. Like, just forgive yourself and move on. Like, change your attitude. Your aura changes just as fast as you change your attitude, and people sense it. But it's not your fault that that's all you've ever seen. There's words like solipsism, where you only know what you know. Yeah. You don't know what you don't know, and you can't make decisions about what you don't know. So yeah, just be in tune with the people that call to you and attract you, and yeah, figure out what habits are limiting yourself, because there's so many, and you don't even know. Like, go ahead.
People cannot get caught up in the imperfections in their life, and life's not meant to be perfect. None of us get out of this place alive, and none of us were born in perfect family environments and situations. We're all going to have some deficits there, right? So, part of the healing process is, believing that you can heal, having faith that you can heal, but also forgiving yourself is, forgiving the situation you were in. There's a lot more. I could go multiple directions with this, but absolutely. Sometimes when people hear things like what we're talking about now, they feel a little bit more depleted and lost because they start to realize the deficits that they have in their life and how big the obstacle is that's keeping them from being cured or healing. And that's not, you can't look at the staircase. You just have to look at the first step, and you just have to take a step in the right direction. You just have to believe that you can move forward, that you can try, that things can be better, and you just have to do something.
So we'll talk about visualization for a second, but what other? Then we'll talk about other long-term longevity tools like that works. But yeah, like visualize yourself where you want to be, and visualize yourself on that first step. Don't have yourself at the end of it where you're in your castle with your million family members all saluting you. No, just think of that first realistic step and make it happen. It will manifest, because you do want to be realistic with your health. You're not going to imagine crazy outcomes. You just want to be healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that visualization has to do with you feeling it. The reason we visualize things is because we're trying to practice getting that frequency of believing that we've received it. And, it's when you feel what it's like to already have obtained what you're grateful for, that's what really starts bringing it into our life. It's not just thinking about it. It's the feeling that comes because you're thinking about it is so in tune that you're in that that's the present. That's not the future. That's right now. You already have obtained what it is, and you are just feeling the gratitude for having it. This is in, I don't know if you're Christian or not, but in the Bible, it's Philippians 4. Paul goes through this thing where he literally gives the recipe for prayer. And he's like, listen, you have to be grateful. Like, you have to give gratitude in all things. And he goes through this thing where he's like, everything that's lovely, everything that's good report. He goes through this list, praiseworthy. These are the things that you need to focus your mind and think about. And then he has this last little sentence, which I always was so interested in. He said, now concerning want, I have learned concerning want to not want, but to be content. And it's like when you have the frequency of want, like, oh, I just want to be healthy. Oh, I just want to have this happen in my life. It's literally the feeling of you already know that you don't have it. You're wanting it means you're even further away from having it. And you're just in that frequency of, oh, you almost had it, but then you missed it again. And that's very different from being grateful that you already have obtained it. There's a book you can read later called Letters to God. And this guy was mad because he never saw answers to his prayers. And he finally decided he's going to write a letter to God. And he's going to burn it, send it to North Pole, do something with it. And he planned out a day. He got his pen and his paper and he started writing. It was the first time in his life that thoughts just started pouring into his head. And he was just receiving what he considered revelation. So he just started writing and writing and writing. And in there, I learned this in a medical conference, actually, in my profession. That's how cool my profession is. He said, the reason why you haven't seen answers to your prayers is your prayers are always focused on want. And the more that you want, the more want you will receive. But if you focus on gratitude for what you have, you will receive more. And that's just the same thing. That's Philippians 4. It's the exact same thing.
What a great thought.
But this is health. If we can mentally believe, if we can mentally visualize, if we can mentally, really have that positive attitude that we can do this, well, then you can do it. But if you're stuck and it's like you are identified with your disease, which that's my anxiety, my Crohn's disease, my whatever it is, when you identify with something, you're saying this is a permanent part, an unchangeable part of who I am.
It's part of your identity.
And we can't do that. We have to identify with truth in true things. There's no such thing as an incurable disease. There's just incurable situations. And there's multiple reasons why those situations are incurable.
Wait, are you saying there's sad people out there with, let's just, GI diseases, and they're so sick with their GI disease and their church brings them food and they get sympathy that they kind of just lean into that, I'm a 100%. Sick person, this is my role, and this is how I contribute to the world?
I've had those patients. So one that just literally popped in my mind was I was doing trauma therapy with her. She came in with this thing that was undiagnosable. She called it a shutdown, like literally she would end up having this headache that was like kind of like a cluster headache. It would get worse and worse. And for the next several days, she would like shiver. She would feel like a train hit her. The only thing that helped her if her husband cuddled her. All the clinics she's been to across the country, none of them have been able to help her. She had mercury toxicity at one time. Well, anyway, very first visit she came in, what I did with her, and recognizing, her energetics being off and using some acupuncture and some other tools that I had, it stopped the shutdown right away. So then it never came and fully went into fruition. It just started to get better and better. Well, one of the times when I was doing some trauma therapy with her, and she lost a son in a 3-wheeler accident. She had some trauma happen in her life. But as I was doing visualization, she kept coming up with blockages. Like her mind would go off to rainbows and bunnies, and it wasn't actually getting to processing what we were doing. And I'm like, man, what is going on here? So I asked her, is there any benefit that you get to holding on to this? And she's laying there with her eyes closed, and she goes, no, like shaking her head yes. And she frowns and goes, I know I said no, but I shook my head yes. And I'm like, well, if there was a benefit, what would it be? And she just broke down and started crying. She realized that she was codependent, that her value came from the other people in her life, and she could not stand the idea of disappointing people. So if the ladies at church and their place at home, they live in multiple states, she was not a patient that lives in this state most of the time. If she got better, then they would expect things of her. And she just knows that if they expected things from her, that she would disappoint them. So if she stays sick, there's no expectations, which means that there's no hurt to her. There's no hurt to her value. Her value doesn't change. And once we recognize that and process that, that's when we got another step in the right direction. So these are the things that people have to realize when we're moving forward.
That's a painful awakening for a lot of people. Huh. All right, longevity tools. What do you recommend besides fasting?
Yeah, fasting is definitely a huge one. Often I recommend grounding.
Really?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely.
Do you get the sheets? Do you got the grounding sheets? You just go outside, going out, put your feet in the grass? What?
I mean, ideally, there's nothing better than being in nature. Go to Hawaii, go be in the ocean, go be on the moist sand, go out in the forest. I could eat garbage and, be on a camping trip with the kids at church or my family or whatever and feel better than I do eating perfect in the city, right? Whatever perfect is. That's debatable.
That's true.
There's a healing energy that's out there. So yeah, I mean, ideally, you have to create the conditions for health to exist. It's our environment dictates it's a pressure that dictates us moving towards health or moving towards disease. And, I mentioned this earlier, but when we were just, you and I were talking, but it's like a health savings account, everything that you do, every thought, every action, every food you eat, everything that's done to you, it's either putting a deposit in your health savings account or it's taking out a withdrawal. And if we're not paying attention to that, we're going to think that we're healthy and everything's fine because we don't see any symptoms. That's what happened to me, to bring this full circle. When I was a teenager, I stayed out late. I was, going on candy runs late at night. I was waking up early to go do random things, jumping off, rocks and bridges, whatever. And all of a sudden when I got sick, I just thought I was a victim of disease. I didn't realize that I was going through my health savings account for years with my habits. And so it's just like swiping a credit card. All of a sudden you swipe, there's nothing there. And you're like, what happened? I'm a victim to something. Someone must have stole my money. Something happened. But you didn't realize that you went through that all yourself. So if you don't change that, you're going to head into health debt. And there's no coming back from health bankruptcy. And there's no coming back from that. So every little habit that we do, every little piece of our environment that we change, mentally, emotionally, physically, how we talk to ourselves, what we eat, whatever, these are all factors that are either putting a deposit or taking out a withdrawal. So grounding is something that I find puts in a deposit in people's box. The best thing is for you to go outside and go touch the earth. Now, do I think grounding mats and stuff are useful? 100%. I've seen it happen. I've seen people's pain go down. I've seen them start sleeping better. I had one woman who she's like, I don't think it's doing anything. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me how you're using it. And she's like, well, I sit on it when I watch TV. And I was like, what do you mean you sit on it? Like with your bare bottom or your pants? And she's like, oh, with my pants. And I'm like, okay, well, what if I took some of your pants and I wrapped it between your battery cable and your terminal and your battery in your car? Do you think it would start? And she's like, oh. I'm like, yeah, we got to have better contact. And so she went home, she put it underneath her feet instead. And she started to get lightheaded and almost pass out. We had to get her off of about 80% of her blood pressure medications for a while because her blood pressure came down so fast by getting that inflammation out of her body.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got lots of stories like that,
Yeah, 2 days ago I did the PEMF. I tried
Yes.
that gizmo.
Like the
And
beamer, something like that.
no, it was like a big metal box one, and they give you these pads that big old thick cables.
Sure.
It looked a lot more World War II industrial, but they swear it's new. I'll tag them. But they had these pads that had the copper coils, and like I've read up on Royal Rife and the old stuff in the 20s, 30s. There was something there that's been taken from us. But this is the version they're selling now, and they have veterinary uses, which are actually cooler than the human ones. But I was holding this pad, and it's allegedly sending electrical signals into my body.
Uh-huh.
And I just thought it made a cool click noise until he's like, no, dude, turn it up. So I did. I could feel my hip joints starting to vibrate.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good for me, but it certainly was
Not
putting
all.
electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right away.
It's different than grounding. Grounding's subtle. Grounding's natural. Grounding's, I'm with you. But we do agree there's other devices that can perfectly work, but not many
100%.
people know how to use them.
PMEFs are great for moving the lymphatic system. I do naturopathic oncology. I've treated cancer patients for 5 years. That can be a part of the treatment for that, but you're moving the lymphatic system. But when you're moving the lymph system, stuff's stagnant in a lot of people. And so they will feel like garbage if you have it too high right away. You've got to kind of ease them into it a little bit. It does something different than grounding. Grounding exchanges positive inflammatory ions in the body for negatively charged ions. You get blood thins because you get negative charges on your red blood cells. You get a different benefit. With a PMEF, you get a pulse electromagnetic frequency that it stimulates lymph to move. That's one of the biggest benefits of it. Some of them, they'll claim that it's kind of like the Earth's frequency that they can mimic. And there's different settings, of course, to kind of do different things. But yeah, those are definitely useful tools,
Right. And those technologies, they're all so adjacent. I'm not sure where one ends and the other begins. But I will tell you, last August, I went to a Tesla Tech conference, not the car, the inventor. And there was a dude who had a Tesla coil that was huge. And he's like, he put a massage table over it. And he's like, dude, check this out. So we got his finger and my finger, we got them close, and there was sparks coming between them. I had pits from the electrical. So I don't know if that one's like overgrounding, if that's too much, but it was powerful. So there's a lot of shenanigans out there. A lot of them are good, but be careful.
Well, you're changing your voltage, that just goes back into everything else we talked about. Voltage is healing, and the things that hinder our voltage, hinder our healing.
Those PMF guys, they gave me the same numbers that you just quoted, -50 up to 150, 200.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're based on the same science as grounding, but they're not quite grounding.
And in the end, there's multiple things that affect that system. Hugging someone can affect their voltage. Forgiving someone can affect their whole voltage. Going in the ocean can affect your voltage. How much you sleep the night before can affect your voltage. I mean, this is what I mean by you cannot heal without creating the environment for healing to exist. So every little thing you do is either creating a pressure towards health or a pressure towards disease.
Those Qigong exercises allegedly increased our voltage.
100%.
And we do them before we played the games, like we charge up.
Yeah.
Dude, this is not my traditional medicine or physics, but I think so many people like you and me are kind of heading that way.
Uh-huh. I didn't mean to care about this stuff. This isn't what I wanted to do with my life. I just, I had to learn and be open-minded to these things because I wanted to help people. And when I realized there were certain tools that help people, I had to just keep investing in them. The first 6 months of my private practice, the majority of my patients' health problems, I realized were connected to traumas. I didn't want to do trauma therapy. I had no interest in talking to people about that kind of stuff when I, first went to medical school. I want to help people with what I went through, but I don't know of a more powerful tool than working on the mental emotional level. It's a higher, and maybe this answers your question you had earlier about the structure of how I see things. But yeah, there is like a hierarchy, right? And the spiritual is like the highest order. And then underneath the spiritual is the mental emotional. And then underneath that is going to be the physical. And you can treat from the top down, but you can't treat from the bottom up. If you have a spiritual problem or a mental emotional problem, you can't treat the physical body to fix those problems. You have to meet it at the level or above the level where that problem originated. But if you have a physical problem, you can treat from the top down. You can, I mean, how many people have been healed through like, some kind of spiritual thing, a blessing of some sort, a prayer. We have what's the name of that place in France? There's a cave in France that they've studied for miracles, and they found it's statistically significant. And the most interesting thing about it is the people who have the biggest miracles are the people that go in the cave and they pray for other people. They don't pray for themselves and their health problem. They pray intently for the other person to get better, and then they get better.
That's advanced charity. That's where it's at.
It's so cool.
How cool. Yeah, like it's real. And what you're saying about spirituality and believing, I mean, everybody knows about the placebo effect. 20% of the time it works every time. So if you're doing a research study, they have to account for this, because people will cure their own cancer if they think they got the right drug, or they will cure their own whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of doctors are like, let's lean into that, because that'll cure like 20% of the people off the bat. Let's do that.
It's just
but
faith.
That's all in the mind.
It is. It's honestly faith. It's hope. It's faith. When I worked for 2 years, I worked like daily with cancer patients most of my week, and I shrunk my business down so I can have that experience, because part of my background was finding my mom's cancer when I was in high school. And, my education is what led her to go into remission for, decades before she passed away. And so I wanted to just like learn more. I wanted to have that opportunity. And, it's a stressful thing. It's a difficult thing, because you build relationships with people that you really love. And you'll see people do the simplest things and they'll get better. And then you'll see people that do everything. And they either did conventional first, and now they're trying to do whatever is considered natural or alternative or whatever. They're doing them at the same time, or they're doing this, and sometimes they go over there because it wasn't working. And it's an interesting thing to observe. But why did some people get better doing simple things and other people didn't get better doing everything? And there is something to the mental, emotional body here. There is something to faith. There is something that's a higher order that I've been just pondering for years. And like, what is that? How do you teach people that? How do you even describe it? What is it? But it is kind of like you're saying, the placebo effect. It's a faith. It's a hope. It's a belief in a positive outcome. And that's where
if I do this, if I do my part, then it'll happen.
Yeah.
And that belief somehow manifests it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's the Greek word for faith that Paul used in the New Testament is the word pistis, and pistis is a contract between two people backed by collateral. So like if you want to go to the library and receive like a computer or a book or something, and the blessing from the library, you have to put up some kind of collateral. And so that's actually what faith is when it talks about it, like, scripturally, anciently. It is a contract, so to say. It's so, I'm going to do this, and this is the blessing I'm going to receive, so you create the terms and you execute your part, and you have full belief that that's going to happen. And that's what happens.
We're not supposed to believe that it's contractual, a tit for tat, but you do need to pledge something. I'm willing to sacrifice this for something better, whether it's your time, your talents, your friendships.
We have to invest something. And that's all it is. And sometimes it can be on our part. It can be from someone else, like a mother's prayer. Someone gifting you something. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can invest your faith, or have faith invested into you and your success.
Dude, all right. Managing stress for longevity was a big part of your website. We've touched on it, but do you have like a specific program, or how do you handle that?
Well, this honestly ties into what we're talking about with faith. It's learning to, instead of being hyper-focused on your fears and your worries, it's, and there's not like, I do trauma therapy, and I found a successful way to do that, and that's usually part of the thing, but I'm giving people home exercises. I've had people come in like severely suicidal, and they're 9 out of 10 happy in 6 weeks by just processing the trauma in their life. It is a case-by-case basis and what tools I decide to use in the order I decide to use them in. And ultimately, it's not me. It's me helping them to know their power. It's me helping them to build confidence in themselves, to not be so stressed and worried about every little thing in their life. And it depends where this comes from. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I offer transmutation as something that nobody thinks about but is real?
Sure.
People who have this transmutation energy, they can take negative crap that comes out of them, just life, and they can spin it and turn it into something positive. And when they're not very good at it, they're like, oh, they're just trying to make something positive out of it. But the masters who can take a big old turd of life and turn it into something that blossoms is a real skill. And we've all met people like that.
Yeah.
That is where it's at.
I agree. That's why I call it, with my patients, I usually call it trauma digestion, just because to get that word digestion there. When you eat food, whether it's like something 99% crap like Takis or like 99% good, like broccoli or something, your body takes what's good and then it eliminates and gets rid of the rest, right? It digests it. You can't hold on to what's not good for you. You take what you can, what you can learn from it and then use from it, and then you get rid of the rest. Well, we have to digest everything in life. We have to digest our traumas in life. And if you don't, they'll just be perpetual. Have you ever heard of memory transference?
No.
Really interesting. So in organ transplant patients, they will get a transplant and all of a sudden they'll be different people. First case I read about this was an 8-year-old girl, and she died and her heart went to a 10-year-old girl, and then 10-year-olds started having nightmares, and the cardiologist didn't know what to do about it. So the cardiologist said, hey, I'm going to send your daughter to a psychiatrist. So she went to the psychiatrist, and eventually the psychiatrist said, hey, mom and dad, we're not making any traction. She's having a nightmare every night. It's always the same. She's being murdered. She can describe what the guy looks like, what he's wearing, what he says. This seems more like a memory. Maybe you should go to the police. That heart came from somewhere. So they went to the police. It matched a case. They found the case. And from her description that they had a sketch artist come in, drew out what she saw, wrote down the words he said, and it matched the description of one of the suspects. And they went and interviewed him again, interrogated him. He confessed to the murder and confessed word to what he said in her nightmare. So it's not just your brain that holds on to memories, it's every cell in our body. And if we don't learn how to process those memories, that's sometimes where the anxiety comes from. You see a car that your ex had, or you drive by a place that you got in an argument with someone, or you got in a fight with someone, whatever it was. Maybe you were embarrassed at something in your life. You feel that when you get triggered, it's because that hasn't been digested yet. That memory is still inside of you, and that memory is hindering the function of your cells. It's hindering the function of longevity. In the end, it's going to be a hinderment to you. There's multiple other cases like that.
There's loads of cases. Now that you said it, I have heard of lots of people where they got a heart transplant and they started liking different candies or different meals.
Yeah, different foods.
Yeah, and modern science can't tell us exactly where the soul is processed. We don't know exactly where things are.
Yeah, well, I've treated cases like that. I had a woman call me and said, this is going to sound weird, but my husband's fighting aliens. And I'm like, well, I haven't heard that before. What does that mean? And she's like, well, he had a heart transplant, and ever since the heart transplant, he is fighting at night, and we can't sleep in the same bed. He's punching and kicking her and waking up huffing and puffing, fighting. And I told her that story, and I said, listen, I'm not going to mess with his meds. He's literally got 12 doctors at Mayo. Anything that I do recommend, I want you to bring it to them to make sure that, that we're not missing something, because, he's an elderly guy in a fragile state. I don't want to rock the boat too much there, but this is what I can do from what I know with what your main complaint is. And I told her, and she's like, well, don't tell my husband that story, but I'll bring him in. We brought her in. I wasn't embarrassed to tell him the story. I thought he needed to know. He had no problem giving it a try. And after the second trauma therapy session with him, he said he doesn't need to come in anymore because he's not a problem. He's sleeping in the same bed with his wife. He's not kicking and punching at night anymore. We were able to tap into that memory in his heart, even though it's not a conscious connection. We were able to, and that was the first time I tried that. I was like, I don't know if I can get this. I'll give it a try. And he got better.
Wow. Dude, those are crazy cases where people, it's so easy to be unbelieving about that, but they keep coming up in my life. Cases where people resolve issues that aren't in traditional medicine.
Yeah. And these things
In
are
the old
just,
days, they give you Xanax or something
yeah.
for that.
Yeah, no, totally. That's what it is. You just go because that's the tools that are offered. We're just using medications for everything instead of actually looking deeper. But the truth is I mean, most primary care doctors, they're not trained in understanding all these other things. And even if they were, they're going to get in trouble if they try to spend the time doing that, because it's all based in this system where this is what you do and this is how you make us money. And if you're not doing that, I mean, I know a radiologist radiologist, and he moved away to California, but he was getting in trouble because he was making his reports too long. He was literally writing out the details of everything that he would want to know, and he was getting in trouble because he's not supposed to spend that much time on reports. And it's like, a lot of times I have to call radiologists and be like, hey, you didn't comment on this. Can you tell me about what you see here? And I'll have to go and spend the extra time and effort to get them to tell me, and I'll have to write it down myself because it's not in the report. Because they're just trying to be quick. It's how they make money.
Yeah, if your doctor spends more than 10 minutes with you, the manager is going to come down and give him a talking to. And not only that, he's going to be behind for the rest of his day because he's already booked every 10 minutes.
Yep.
And it's just not a good way to do medicine. People need to figure out why and learn what habits to change. But in 10 minutes, you got exactly enough time to get a prescription. And that's it.
Yep.
That's it. So I think the system's a bit gamed, but it's super heartening for me to hear that people are getting back to foods, herbs, supplements, and then, meditation, just the good things, the things that you can't really patent or put on a renew list, I guess.
It's a process of awareness, and a lot of people are waking up to it. But I'm happy overall with what a lot of people are trying to do and taking responsibility for their health. Not everything that's marketed as natural is good for you. I mean, sometimes I ask people a question like, what's healthier for you? Like, crude oil, a bioidentical hormone, which is something made in a lab, but it's made to be exactly like what's in your body, or like an essential oil, which takes like 40 pounds of something to press out a drop. Like what does natural mean? It's this marketing term that we use. And, because I have people come in and are like, oh yeah, I'm all about natural medicine. And I'm like, okay, awesome. Well, tell me what natural medicine is to you. Where are you at? Because, they're not professionals. I'm not expecting them to be, but I love that they're trying to take responsibility for their own health, because ultimately that's what we're supposed to do. Me being a doctor is not to be, do what I say. I'm a teacher. I'm here to educate you and be a guide to help you. I'm not with you 99% of the day. So you come, you see me for the hour or two that I see you, once a week, once a month, whatever it is. And I'm able to help motivate, inspire, empower, give you direction on what you need to do on your daily basis. But you're the one that needs to invest in your health savings account. You have to put in the work to remove the obstacles and to support the deficiencies. And yeah, I can provide you with tools, mental, emotional tools, nutritional tools, supplements, herbs, homeopathy. You can come in the office and we can give you a boost in the right direction with acupuncture or, a back adjustment or whatever it is we decide to do. But ultimately, you're responsible. And I want you to have that responsibility with you. And if you have, I'm here to guide you. I'm here to teach you how to be more responsible for your health. I had to learn to do that for myself. I gave up my autonomy to the medical system and I got sick. I got worse. And it wasn't until I took back my autonomy and I started having my own guide and I started listening to what he had to say and applying the principles, right? Because every blessing we receive, it's because we're following a law or principle that is based in truth, and when you learn those laws and principles, the laws that govern health, right? Going to bed on time, moving your body every day, drinking adequate water, breathing deeply, forgiving others, touching the earth, getting in the sunshine. I mean, these are all the laws that you have to be obedient to in order to receive the blessings of health. And if we're not being obedient to those laws, then all we're doing is we're writing out our health savings account until eventually we go into health debt.
You're running on credit the whole time, aren't you?
Yeah. Wow. Exactly. And then that affects your relationships, and then you got more stress, and that affects your job, and you got more stress. And it's just this cycle.
And then you got more stress.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, dude. We're going to have to do this again and talk about more specific things, but I'm loving your outlook on this.
Yeah, anytime, Joe. I'm super happy to. I'm very passionate about what I do because, it gives me. There's nothing that makes me happier. I was just telling my wife, like, I haven't seen anyone in like over a month that hasn't reported back to me that they're better. Like every time I see them, they're getting better, and that, like, who can say that? You know,
Nobody.
and I'm not. This isn't my pride or anything. Like I'm, I do not know everything. I'm not. I can't pretend to be an expert in everything. There's lots of things, and I'm honest with my patients. Of like, hey, I'm not sure about that. Let me look it up. Let me think about it. But like, I do know that there are laws that govern health, and I do know that if we apply those laws, and for a lot of people, they just need to do some basic things to start getting some traction. To be honest, and they just don't know what those basic things are, or they don't know how to do it. They just need some guidance, and once they do it, all of a sudden they start in motivational tools. That's why I love what you do. I love the CIMT exam because I have a father and a son. The father is another provider, friend of mine. Father's 55, and his CIMT said that he was 43. His son's 20, and his CIMT said that he was 41. So there's 2-year age difference because of the different lifestyle between dad, who is a holistic health minded doctor, and the son, who's just young and being reckless a little bit with things. So when I have that with young kids, I can be like, hey, listen, you don't want to end up with what I went through. Here's some motivation for you. We can do this again in a year, and this is great. And I have other people I had one lady that came in and she said that her cardiologist gave her a clean bill of health. Everything's great. She had an 85% blockage in one of her arteries, and I'm like, well, okay, don't panic, but there's things that we need to do. We need to make some changes with your lifestyle. It's not going to help you to be worried and stressed about this, but now that we know this is here's some extra motivation for you.
Yeah. Reconciling. Yeah, you're right, man. Wow. All right, my head's full. I got to think about a lot of the things you said. I think you recommended 3 books I got to go get now.
I think I talked too much. Sorry about that.
No,
but
this is exactly what I wanted.
People are willing to, if anyone has any questions that actually, watches this, they're welcome to email me. I'm happy to go deeper into things. And of course, I'm happy to come on another time and keep chatting with you about specific subjects. Just give me a call or an email and tell me what you want to talk about. And, we'll have another good conversation.
Yeah, one more thing about healers. Like, I was always jealous of these kids that knew they wanted to be a doctor since they were young.
Yeah.
And I just kind of fell into what I'm doing, and I dig it helping people. You too. But some people, like the true, and I'm not saying you're not a true healer, but the guys who know that what they want to be when they're young, and it's just drawn on them. And I feel so sad for them that these healers are now in these corporate assembly line jobs, seeing patients every 10 minutes, restricted on how much they can actually heal people. And it's kind of sad. But if you can find a doctor that's a healer and you can get some time with them, then I think that's a blessing. I do believe people have callings like that. Some are builders, some are helpers, some are healers.
Absolutely. And, for most of us, I think it takes multiple people. I think about the mentors I've had in my life. I think about the doctors I've had in my life, and they've all played a different role. They've all helped and open my mind in different places, So, there's nothing wrong. My patients sometimes will be like, they're worried if they go see someone else that they don't want me to know about or something. I'm like, no, hey, listen, if you feel like you're at the end of our journey together, I love you. I'm here for you. I'll take you as far as I can take you. But if you feel like you're being called another direction, follow that, because there's other people that know things that I do not know. It's important for you to follow your own personal inspiration, your own personal guidance. And likewise, I have lots of patients that have been other places, and I'm the what number, functional medicine, naturopath, specialist, whatever. Like I'm way down the road. I'm their last resort. They'll tell me a lot of times. It's pressure. I know through, like, they'll tell me that, like, God sent me to them, and I'm like, man, that is a lot of pressure. You sure?
He didn't tell me you were coming, but I'll do my best.
Like, I'm honored that you think that, and I hope that we, have the results that you want for sure. But it definitely puts an extra level of pressure on me, because I want that to be true. I want that to be true. But
yeah, that's their faith coming through, right?
Yeah, and you got to support that, like, hey man, if you feel that way, I'm going to do everything in my power to help you. I will. Yeah.
You're a good man, Dr. Travis Mowery. I'll see you next time. Thanks for
Yeah.
the talk.
Yeah, great talk, Joe.
You too. Bye.